Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Know Thy Enemy, presented by the Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Evan McPhillips. And as always, we are going to be previewing the Bengals' upcoming opponent, looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, and where the Bengals should be looking for their keys to victory. With that in mind, we'll go ahead and get started with the Carolina Panthers, a Tale of Two Kitties edition, as Andy Dalton takes over the starting quarterback job from Bryce Young. And you saw a very different Panthers team this week. Against the Raiders, Andy Dalton was the first quarterback this season in the NFL to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Panthers looked much more cohesive on offense and also played with a renewed moxie and zest on defense. And I think it's really important that when we're kind of examining this team that we kind of not necessarily entirely throw out the first 2 games, but look a lot at this most recent game to get a better idea of what the Bengals can be expecting going forward, because that week 1 and week 2 opponent is likely not walking through that door in the same vein, as this team has drastically changed in terms of their motivation, their belief, and their overall composure and confidence. And that's going to make them very different from the team that they were with Bryce, who was just unfortunately struggling to produce offense after having a really rough go of it in his first couple of years, changing schemes, changing coaches. I think it's going to benefit him and everybody as well if he just takes a seat on the bench for just a little bit, tries to kind of figure things out a little bit and just have room to grow and find his footing a little bit better. With that in mind, let's go ahead. Let's look at some of the standouts for the Carolina Panthers, some of their key contributors that they're going to have that you can be watching for this week, and also go over the Bengals' keys to victory and how they can try and get their first win of the season. Gosh, who thought we'd be saying that at week 4? Anyways, all right, moving on. The Carolina Panthers. I know that they have been much maligned over the last maybe season 2, 3, and rightly so. There's been a lot of bumps in the road. You've got a strong character for an owner, let's say, that makes for a lot of headlines. But despite all that, despite all the troubles, the Panthers this season have PFF's 4th ranked pass blocking grade as a team. The interior of the offensive line that once struggled mightily is now consisting of Damian Lewis, Austin Corbett, and Robert Hunt, who all have pass blocking grades on the season of over 80. And reminder, PFF grades 60 to 65 is generally about average. So they're playing well above average in terms of their pass blocking ability on the interior. We saw how that affected the Bengals when they played the Commanders recently, and they were unable to generate any type of pressure from the interior or other spots from guys not named Trey Hendrickson. That's definitely going to be a key component for this week. They have a Kwanu at tackle, who is their lowest ranked pass blocker, but he's still playing at about an average level. He's allowed 6 of their 17 pressures on the season. We'll see if they can try and attack these edges in unique ways. I would like to see some blitzes, some simulated pressures, just to try and confuse Andy Dalton and also the offensive line with who is going to be coming or bailing out at any one time, to try and stress things and create pressure that they struggled to get against the Commanders, especially if the Panthers are going to take a page out of the Commanders' book and use a lot of tight ends and running backs and double teams to try and slow Trey Hendrickson down. At the other spot on tackle, they have Taylor Moton, who has kind of been up and down a little bit, dealt with injuries throughout his career, but is still a very solid veteran. So the key takeaway is their offensive line is not the putrid best that it used to be just even a year or 2 ago. They are much better now. Unfortunately, Damian Lewis may end up missing the game. You never want to see that for any player, but that would definitely be a sigh of relief for the Bengals, probably, as they would have the Panthers losing a very talented interior offensive lineman. Now, the group is not a devastating run blocking unit, but they are all safely average or above on the interior. And despite any struggles they may have kind of on their bookends, Chuba Hubbard is still a talented player and also top 10 this season in PFF rushing grade and yards per attempt, including the 2 games that they struggled to generate any type of cohesive offense with Bryce Young as their quarterback. Now, with Andy Dalton coming back, playing this quarterback position, bringing back some competent quarterback play to the Carolina Panthers offense, we've seen the revival of Deontay Johnson. Now, Deontay Johnson is no stranger to bad quarterback play throughout his career, but he was finding it really hard through the first 2 weeks with his 12 targets, 5 receptions for 34 yards to really be productive the way that we know he can be, because he is a very talented route runner and receiver. With Dalton in one game, he already got 13 targets, 8 receptions for 122 yards and a touchdown. So same type of kind of workload, but more receptions, 4 times the yards and a touchdown. So having a capable quarterback who can kind of hit him in the intermediate and all areas of the fields, maybe right when he's coming out of the break on his route and with timing and pace, that's definitely helped Deontay Johnson. So he's going to be the main receiving threat that they're going to be looking to stop. Adam Thielen has been doing well in his own right, but just got placed on IR, which will make way for rookie Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, who is an older and late breakout college prospect, but he's 6'1", 221, is a deep threat with 4.39 elite speed despite his size, which is really impressive. And he also ranked 98th percentile in his production against single coverage in his final year at college. So a very talented receiver in his own right, a little bit on the older side. Not necessarily super fluid or flexible in terms of his route running, but is a yak threat at the line of scrimmage and also a deep potential threat. So definitely a guy you're going to want to have an eye on. Is going to be interesting to see if he can generate some explosive plays for the Panthers. We go ahead and turn our eye to the defense now. And this is where things can kind of fall apart a little bit for the Panthers, because the offense, when you paint it the way I did right there, it sounds like they have a pretty solid unit. And that would be fair to say with Andy Dalton at quarterback. But on the defensive line, you have Ashawn Robinson, who's kind of leading the charge. He's produced 5 of his 6 total pressures just last week versus the Raiders, having that renewed spirit that we talked about. He's also been a reliable run defender throughout his career and inconsistent generally as a pass rusher, but we'll see if he can kind of continue that momentum he had last week as the entire team seems to gain confidence and seem to have a rejuvenation for their desire to play tough, hard football. Flanking him is NFL journeyman Jadeveon Clowney, who needs no introduction, as Bengals fans remember him from when he played with the Ravens, and many college football and NFL fans remember him from playing with the Texans, the Gamecocks, and everyone else, right? Jadeveon Clowney, even as far as he's made it into his NFL career now, he is still finding ways to be productive rushing the passer. He's currently the club leader with 10 pressures on 62 edge rushing snaps and passing situations, and he will be the primary pass rush threat that the Bengals will be looking to slow down Sunday. We'll see if he ends up getting matched up with Amarius Mims and how often, but I would definitely be looking at that matchup as the rookie makes his first start at right tackle with Trent Brown being out, and see what the Panthers do to kind of stress him. Looking in the secondary, J.C. Horn was an exciting prospect coming out of college. He's had his fair share of flashes in coverage. He's got an interception in the pass breakup already this season. However, he does have a glaring weakness in the run game where he has a 30.8% missed tackle rate, which is the 5th worst among cornerbacks this season. The Bengals will be really wise to try and test him with speed and elusiveness of guys like Chase Brown or Jamar Chase, making an effort to call some plays to that side and force him to be a tackler in space and make him uncomfortable. The other reason you might want to target him is because on the opposite side, you have veteran Mike Jackson, who's been a stabilizing force for them at corner, and defenses have really been trying to test him in coverage with mixed results, I think it's fair to say. He's targeted 27 times already through 3 weeks, and while he has allowed 18 catches to the tune of 11.5 yards per reception, he's also racked up an interception and 3 pass breakups. Where he's really been impressive, though, is against the run, where he has 19 tackles without a single missed tackle, good for an 86.5 PFF tackling grade. Now, the back end of the defense, this is probably the weakest part of the unit. Xavier Woods and Jordan Fuller were some free agent safeties that were kind of kicked around as bargain bin options, and the phrase "you get what you pay for" definitely is apt here. While they haven't quite found their footing in the new surroundings, Wood has at least been able to get closer to average, managing a 51.6 coverage grade. However, Jordan Fuller has really struggled in coverage, and that's not what you want from a safety. He has a 39.3 coverage grade this season, which ranks dead last among 63 safeties. So that is definitely going to be an area that you can target with some deep shots, whether that's Jermaine Burton on some streaks and some posts, or whether that's Jamar Chase going deep, or some jump balls to T. Higgins. There's going to be some opportunities for some deep shots for this Bengals offense. I don't want to be without mentioning guys like Josie Jewell, who has been a pretty good overall running middle linebacker, being solid against the run and pretty solid for the Broncos altogether before he became a free agent and signed with the Carolina Panthers. But he is a little bit on the lighter side, closer to 230. And overall, the Panthers rank 25th against the run as a team in terms of PFF run defense grade. So I think there is some opportunity for the Bengals to take a guy, take their run game, which is actually second in terms of EPA per rushing EPA, and also third in terms of rushing success rate this season. So they have had a top 5 run game in terms of expected points added and in success rate. You're definitely going to have some opportunities for the Bengals in the running game to attack the defensive line, the linebacking core, and also make some of these corners and safeties be tacklers. That's definitely going to be a way that this Bengals offense can continue to sustain drives, which has sometimes been an issue with consistency with them. Um, Obviously, you have Shaq Thompson, who has been around the league a little bit, has struggled generally this season. He's 9, 10 years now with Carolina. And as much as we love our guys, Bengals fans know we had Ray Malaluga for a very long time. You love your stalwarts, but eventually the age starts to creep up with them a little bit. And that's when you kind of start to slow down. And you've kind of seen that a little bit where Shaq Thompson was really, really good in the first 4 or 5 years of his career with Carolina, and then kind of struggled a little bit in the last 2 or 3 years. Just not necessarily bad, but you can see it's not the same player he used to be, which after you've been playing for almost 10 years, it's completely understandable. And other players like Sam Hubbard for the Bengals are kind of going through that right now, where injuries and age are kind of slowing them down from the very productive players that they once used to be. With all this in mind, there's some very talented players on this Carolina defense and offense in their own respects. What are the Bengals' keys to victory? How do they attack on offense and defense to try and make sure that they secure that first win and don't tumble to 0-4 and have to start looking in the mirror and having some really tough conversations? I think on offense, like I talked about earlier, you've got to challenge JC Horn to try and tackle an open space on outside runs and screens, attack the poor tackler as opposed to Mike Jackson, who has really excelled versus the run and been a very sure tackler this season. You got to continue to utilize the efficient run game. Like I talked about, Chase Brown is first right now among running backs with at least 13 attempts and yards per attempt. I think it's 7.4. The team is second in rushing EPA, third in rushing success rate. Lean on it. Use it as a way to move down the field, to get yourself into easy passing situations. Use it to create opportunities for play action shots against these deep safeties that have largely struggled in coverage. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for them to do that. Looking at the defense, you have to find ways to create pressure outside of Trey Hendrickson. You have to find ways to change the picture pre and post snap on Andy Dalton, because you can get those turnover worthy plays from him. You can trick him pre and post snap. He had 2 turnover worthy plays last week that did not result in turnovers, but that's not to say that he can't do that again this week. So definitely, I think you need to see more simulated pressures, more people on the line, make the offensive line, make Andy Dalton guess which guys are bailing, which guys are rushing, whether you're going to end up with a blitz at all. And then you can end up with guys who are just blowing blocks, wasted space, anything like that, because they guessed wrong or they communicated incorrectly. Stress those lines of communication, make these guys work for it, make them guess, blitz them too, make Andy Dalton uncomfortable. If you're blitzing, you know Andy Dalton's going to want to check down, going to want to quickly get rid of it. He got rid of it, I think, in 2.12 seconds last week against the Raiders. That is very fast. If you're blitzing, if you're putting pressure on him, he will check down, which allows your guys like Cam Taylor-Britt, like Dax Hill, who love to play that downhill aggressive style, to do that without fear of consequence, because then they can bite down on things and they don't have to worry about getting beat on the double move. So I think you really got to try and speed Andy Dalton up, generate pressure, even if it's uncomfortable for guys like Lou Anarumo, who maybe don't like to blitz as much as a guy like a Steve Spagnuolo. Or do as crazy, exotic bailing coverages like Brian Flores is doing in Minnesota. Okay, but you still have to find a way to generate pressures in unique ways, because you can't just let Trey Hendrickson be slowed down for half the snaps in the game and go, well, shoot, there goes our pass rush. No, you have to find a way. You have to throw the kitchen sink at this Carolina offense. Obviously, the other point, tackle. Quit missing tackles. Quit taking all the easy plays that you get that are at the line of scrimmage, that you can put yourself into easy, manageable down and distances on third down, second down. Make the tackle. Make the freaking tackle. Keep everything in front of you. there's too many explosive plays. We know explosive plays were an issue last year. Supposedly bringing back Von Bell and having some veteran safeties in there like Geno Stone, we're going to solve those issues. Well, for the first 7 completions against the Commanders, excuse me, were 14 yards, 15 yards, 30 some odd, and 55 yards. That's not going to work. You're not going to be a successful defense constantly giving up explosive plays. You got to be willing to keep things in front of you and find different ways to do that, whether that's blitzing, like I said, and speeding him up and making him throw short like they did with Joe Burrow. Maybe you cloud the coverage like the Patriots did in week 1. Cloud everything deep, make them check down, then rally and tackle. But either way, you got to keep things in front of you, rally and tackle. Don't let them get the explosive plays. And obviously, I mentioned it already. Andy Dalton with 2 turnover-worthy plays last week against the Raiders. When he gives you those opportunities, you have to capitalize. You have to get those turnovers to help give yourself a much better chance at winning a tough game on the road against a team who has found a renewed spirit for the game. With all that in mind, that's everything I have. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Please give this video a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can continue to bring you this awesome content every single day. And we will see you for next week's edition of Know Thy Enemy. Thank you. Houday. See you next time.